This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.
Hello, this is Kathy King from For Flux Sake, and Matt, Rose, and I want to send our love and support out to all the artists, potters, sculptors, and craftspeople impacted by Hurricane Helene in Western North Carolina. Though this event occurred weeks ago, there are so many individuals still struggling to rebuild. If you are in a position to do so, please consider donating to the Craft Emergency Relief Fund. You can go to surfplus.org to learn more. Thank you. Hello, my name is Kathy King, and welcome to the For Flux Sake podcast. I'm coming to you from the Harvard Ceramics program in our fair city, Allston, Massachusetts. I'm here with Rose and Matt Katz of the world-famous Ceramic Materials Workshop, and they are ready to answer your burning questions about clay and glaze. Well, hello, Matt and Rose.
Hey, Kathy.
Hello, Kathy.
Happy fall.
Oh,
Yes, my favorite season.
Isn't it? Pumpkin spice, everything, Allie. No, not so much.
Not
All
so
right.
much. No,
So-
the cooler weather and the amazing how the sun feels on your skin.
Oh, that's so romantic, Rose.
Yeah.
Matt, what do you have? What do you love about fall?
I love the smell of fall in New England.
It
Oh,
does. Smells like
absolutely.
fall. Amazing.
Gorgeous. Gorgeous.
Really.
Like wet and moldy and piney.
Decomposing pumpkins on front stoops.
The stench of the earth dying once again.
Wow. All right.
That's
great.
my sweetie, everybody.
Well, seeing that we're already on a decline, I can announce that on this episode, I believe you two, we need to return to Materials Corner.
Oh,
Materials corner.
Materials Corner. No one wants to be there, but we're
No.
going. All right.
Do we have to wear a dunce hat when we go to the material corner? Like, do we have
these
a
are not
I
our
don't know.
fault. We don't have to take any responsibility for these.
Black veil. So, Matt, what do you got for us?
The latest is the discontinuation of lusters being sold by Mako. The metallic lusters they took off the market rather suddenly.
Yeah, it was quick. Grab and growl.
Yeah, really, really quickly. They sort of pulled them from the market, and it was a little bit ugly. I saw a lot of reports of people complaining that they placed orders that were taken and then canceled, and nobody knows what to do, and a
Wow.
bit of a tragedy. And we've talked to some folks that definitely say that those were their favorite lusters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
They were good.
Yeah. I will say the first thing about the panic is that they are not the only lusters. There are other companies that are selling lusters. So it's just a question of who's going to have the good stuff in the future. And even when you go through Mako's documentation, they talk about that the discontinuation was because they were not the ones making the lusters. That they were buying them, and I didn't have the note open here for as we were recording, but it sort of sounded like that it was a quality control issue with the manufacturer, and they don't have any control over that. I mean, they were putting their name on the product, so that stinks.
Oh, but good on them for pulling it if it didn't live
Yeah.
up to their standards,
Absolutely.
Applaud them
Absolutely.
there.
That's a hard decision.
It's the responsible thing to do.
But what makes a luster go bad, do you think? Like
Well,
starts hanging out late at night.
Hangs out on the corner, and I hear Gersely Borate might hang out there too. But
they
that's
hang out by the
rumor.
burning trash can singing doo-wop
Mhm.
music, and then it's all downhill from there.
Stupid.
On the other side of the tracks too. Talc lives there, Custer too. I mean, it's not a good part of town.
It's not. I will say though, I on this, like I said, find another luster, everybody. They definitely are out there. I mean, I know people will search far and wide. One thing that had some people had mentioned to us when it has happened, because we're the materials people, is some people said, "Well, I just want to make my own lusters."
Oh, no.
Such a
No,
bad idea.
no,
Oh,
no, you're
Well,
not
I
gonna.
will say at Harvard, at the Harvard Art Museum, there was a wonderful fellow who was her specialty was looking into a pink luster that was used in Germany for a while, and she was really trying to get chemists involved, and I know it had to do with acid and a kind of
Yeah.
nobody wanted to sign off on that, but it was fascinating. I was thinking like, oh, is this something we could do, pick this up again? But so yeah, talk about why it's not a good idea.
Yeah, it really is a big catch. That now, first of all, as there are a lot of different lusters, and so that we have to say, I'm mostly talking about the metallic lusters, but something like a pink, the colored lusters, that's a whole other chemical situation. The mother of pearl, all that. The metallic lusters, the gold, the platinum, the palladium, all of those. The way that those are made is that they take the actual metal and they soak it in hydrochloric acid. So, first warning sign, everybody. If you need
Warning,
to bust
warning.
out the hydrochloric acid to just get your studio functioning, that's probably not a good idea. I don't think I'm gonna recommend. We're all for getting a little dangerous in the glaze lab and living dangerously with white powders, but if it comes to busting out the hydrochloric, I'm not gonna recommend that. But when you do that, you make what's called a metallic salt, and that's a slightly soluble form of the metal. And the way that they actually work is that you put it in an oil medium, and that the oil is making it brushable, but it also acts as a reducing material. So when you fire it, why it smells so bad is when the oil burns, it actually reduces the salt back to the metal. And you're actually embedding a thin layer of actual gold back onto the work, which is why if anyone's accidentally microwaved a plate with luster on it, it'll spark because it's a real layer of gold or whatever metal that is. And so it is definitely not in your interests to try to make your own lusters. I mean, first of all, y'all gonna go out and buy gold bars and start dissolving them in acid. I mean, that's a crime
Hey,
scene right there.
maybe.
Great.
I don't know.
Starting to
Depends.
look at grandma's ring in a different way.
Tell me what to do with my acids. I'm gonna drop acid all day long. Drop it all over this gold right here.
Well, and that's one instance where we do say it's a good. You should ventilate your kiln too when you're doing
Mhm.
Yeah.
luster firings because of this process and what it's burning off. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, and since we're on the subject, because we do, vent our kilns at Harvard, but when people luster, I still ask that they do it at the end of the evening,
Oh yeah.
just so
oh
that,
yeah,
anything that's seeping out, wouldn't bother anybody. But what's the link of, I was taught to luster fire with the peeps out to red heat. Is there a link, like for golds and red overglaze enamels? Is there something real about that?
I mean, I'm fairly skeptical about that because we've talked about the passivity of the materials inside an electric kiln. The harder thing is that you are trying to create a reducing atmosphere inside a kiln that's full of oxygen. But at the same time, could you overdo that? Yes. Interestingly enough, you can underdo it. The very first luster firing I ever did, I'll never forget. I was in undergrad sophomore sculpture class, and they brought out some lusters that they gave to us, and I lustered up a bunch of dishes, and they all came back completely normal. They were all just the salts. There
Oh,
was no
nothing
gold to be
showed up?
found. Yeah, and I think it was I think they had fired them in a gas kiln, and I think that they had reduced it. The flames had gotten reduced at the wrong time and burned out the oil before it had gotten to the luster firing.
Oh.
So, it's definitely going to be sensitive. And I think not having control over it's not great. But then at the same time, as Rose is saying, like, you need to vent it, but that's also just to keep it from combustion, because the combustion is the problem. And you're inside that electric kiln and it's not getting out in any sort of way, and that'll help it get out, but then it's getting out into the kiln room, which is not necessarily the best thing. So yeah, you definitely, for how skeptical we are of kiln vents, if you are a luster person, you definitely need a kiln vent.
Yeah.
But it's not just the venting,
True
it's the
that.
application too. Like that oil medium, you have
Oh,
to use
yeah.
solvents to clean, and the oil medium can stink and the solvents stink. And yeah, it definitely, like, you don't make friends being a luster person because you stink up the
Yeah.
whole
I've talked about this before because I often, like, if I'm doing a 2-week workshop, I always cover lusters, and just some of the oil, there's nothing wrong with the oil, but
Mhm.
there's such strong smells, and oftentimes people prone to migraines, it'll
Yeah.
trigger something like the clove oils and et cetera, but yes, dangerous business, luster.
Don't do it, people.
Yeah.
I mean, luster,
Don't
luster
Well,
is
make your
no,
own.
do it.
Do it
Do
properly.
it.
Do it. Do what
Just
Kathy
don't
says.
make your own.
Yeah, no, okay, we've established this. Our official call on this is do not do this. All right, y'all. So we have some fabulous questions today from around the globe. So our first question comes from Steve in the UK, and he has an issue with things being gloopy. One job. One job.
One job.
Leave this in, Ben. Producer Ben gets called up by Kathy.
I've started this 3 times. It's just coincidentally not at the right time, all 3 times.
Hey, Kathy, Rose, and Matt. My name's Steve from Herefordshire in the UK. I've basically made a bit of a screw up. I've made 30 litres of a quite an expensive glaze, and I probably wasn't concentrating, and I probably put way too much of one of the ingredients in. I've got a feeling it's a bentonite because basically I added water to it, and I added more and more to it because it's very thick, and it's the density now. So basically, I think it's 1.2, which is 1 litre weighs 1,200 grams. So there's a lot of water in it, but it's still incredibly, really thick viscosity. So maybe it's the clay, the bentonite I put too much in. I've sent you the recipe. I was wondering what I can do now. I've got 30 litres of this quite expensive glaze, and I'd like to try and see what I can do with it, whether I can mix it with something else or I can somehow I know I can't take the clay out of it, but if there's anything you think I can do, I'd really much appreciate it. Thank you.
Wow. So what's the recipe?
He did include the recipe. It's not a particularly dramatic recipe. It's potash feldspar, spodumene, silica, dolomite, Gillespie borate, and then it's 13% tin and 2% bentonite. And Steve, you're not here, but lean into your headphones a little bit. And I got Steve,
Why are we
I
talking
gotta
like
ask you a
this?
question.
Okay.
Steve, did you test this glaze before you made up 30 liters? I need to know.
I know.
Wait, let's assume he did. Let's assume he did.
But I gotta ask, because 13% tin, that could feed a starving child. That's a lot of tin.
It's
That's
a lot of
okay.
tin.
so much
Like more
tin.
than you would ever need. That's what you're saying? Like to do
Way
its
more.
job? Okay.
Way more.
Because I was suspect of the Gillespie because that's that pudding thing we talked about on another
Yes.
episode, and that's happening to
That's
us at
my
our
first
studio.
thinking.
Yeah.
is
Right,
this is the
Rose?
Gillespie.
Yeah.
But the picture he sent is also, it's pink.
It is pink, which there's nothing listed in this glaze that's pink. I would have to assume that that is a studio additive for identification. That's not
Oh, yeah.
uncommon to add in something like a food coloring to a white glaze. And this will be a white glaze, maybe pink at best.
Yeah, but not
and
pink
so it
in
just helps
its
you
raw
see.
form.
No, it'll all burn out. But yes, Gillespie is a point. You both of you are correct. Great observation on the Gillespie.
Yay! Ding, ding, ding! One check for us.
Hold on, no, because I still want to go back to the tin and
Oh,
why
come
I asked
on.
whether or not Steve tested this glaze. Because we don't talk about it. I don't even know if it's come up on the show. It may have, but there are certain materials in our glaze pantries that will get exceptionally thick when you mix them with water. And there are a couple of big ones. The most common one that most people associate with is zinc. And you'll often, like in our online classes and other things, you'll hear me say a thing of some glazes are good with 60 milliliters of water in a test batch, like a 100-gram test batch, and some glazes need 160. And when I'm referring to 160 water needed, I'm generally referring to glazes with zinc in them. Zinc is famous for needing just a ton of water to get it to flow, and that's okay. Some people hear these high amounts of water and Steve has the same reaction. He's saying his specific gravity is very, very low, which means he's added in a lot of water. And zinc tends to do that. He doesn't have any zinc. We have talked about Gillespie and Gersley borate, that those would tend to make glazes thick. The Gersley, we know it was because it has a bentonite in it, and bentonite will make it thick. And Steve mentioned that as a possibility. We talked before that we don't know what's in Gillespie. We don't have a great answer. Hi, Hamill and Gillespie. We're here waiting. Send us chemical analysis.
Call us.
We know you're out there. Give me a call. Give me a ring. Let me know. Just put it out there. Just share the info. That is definitely a possibility. You are both right. But the next one is iron. Iron will make glazes very, very thick. In the raw state, again, I'm talking about the wet state here, everybody, not the fired state. But what's the last ingredient on that list? Tin. Tin is infamous for making glazes exceptionally thick. And the next part is 13%. When you have tin in a glaze, like 4 to 6% is what you need to get it to do what tin does, which is generally just making it white. In some glazes, it'll go a little bit pink, but that's what tin on its own will do. It works as no pacifier.
Yeah, just to give people an idea, like for a Majolica, like Ben, do you know offhand, like what's the percentage of average Majolica would have in it?
Well, it would not be 13%, so much
I
later.
rest my
Lower.
case.
And we'd like to mention Ben's new book on low fire glazes with such technical gems as that.
Best advice in the book, not this. When I test tin, I test it between 3 and 6%. Like that's my
And that's
general
high.
tip. Yeah.
That's high.
So when you're at 13, like 6% will make it go thick. And you're at double that. So I could you have screwed up the bentonite? Absolutely. Could it be the Gillespie borate? Absolutely. But I look at that and I'm just like 13% tin. There is your problem. So this is why I gotta, I wish this was a live show. It gets it's too complicated to do this show live. But if I had Steve here, I would have to say, have you made this glaze before? Because if you had, you would know if it would tend to get thick, which I would assume that it does. And B, did you make a small batch and find that it was really thick too? Because it's going to get thick at 100 grams the same way it's going to get thick at 30 kilos. So that's the big question is, if Steve had done that. But none of that matters because Steve literally, he tagged us on social media at the same time, being like, You guys, I spent the dog's college fund on this glaze because that's the other thing on tin is
Yeah.
crazy expensive.
Ugh.
And so it's a lot of money. So he was really, really panicking about this glaze. So what can he do? Well, it does depend on what's wrong with the glaze.
First thing, his density is way too low.
Well, it is and it isn't. If he can get a good application, the specific gravity kind of doesn't matter, right? And this is one of the things that drives me crazy with the way that people use specific gravity, right? Specific gravity is supposed to be a value that tells you the proportion of raw materials to water, right? So when you hear people say specific gravity, he calls it density in his call, but it's what most people know as specific gravity. How it works is that water has a specific gravity of 1, glaze materials have a specific gravity around 2.4. And when you split the difference, you're about 50-50, you end up with like a 1.5, 1.6. That's where most glazes will exist. You know, they can go up to 1.7, but you get in that neighborhood. As you add more water, the specific gravity goes down. It gets closer to that of pure water, which would be 1. He says he's down to 1.2. So it's low, but the glaze is still yogurt, right? It's still super duper thick. So could he continue to add water? Yes, he could. But it's probably, it's a question of whether he can get a good coating with adding in the water. Take out a small proportion of the glaze, try to water it down, see if you can get a coating with it. And then I would say go with water. My first answer is always go with water, but do a test batch out of what you have. So take that, weigh out what you've got, do the reverse math to figure out how much dry material, add more water. And if you get a good firing from it, it's okay, because specific gravity varies depending on how that glaze is going to apply. There is no such thing as a good specific gravity. So when you see people online are like, oh, well, I want a specific gravity of 1.5, who cares? That's because that is the specific gravity for the glaze they are using and how they apply it. If the glaze you're using needs a really low specific gravity and a ton of water to get there, fine. If that doesn't work, if the glaze gets too thin, what can you do? That's where it gets really rough, because it may just be the tin doing what it's doing. The one thing that you really could try is to add in a dispersant. So in the States, that would be Darvan or sodium silicate, or in the UK or in most of the world, they'll use a product called Dispex. Adding in, and again, take out a test batch, test, right? Take out a test batch and try adding in a couple of drops of Dispex or sodium silicate. See if it thins out, okay? It should, but if you did add in a ton of bentonite, the bentonite's going to drink up that dispersant, which could be a problem.
Well, and 2, I mean, sometimes I've had glazes where Darvan doesn't work. It doesn't thin it out. So I've used sodium hexametaphosphate or sodium triphosphate.
Yeah.
That'll work.
SHMP that Rose is talking about, you can get at the hardware store.
Okay.
It's like a
okay.
common cleaning
Oh, okay.
agent. It's
Gotcha,
not as
gotcha.
dangerous.
Yeah,
as
it's like a
sounds.
paint cleaner agent. It's called trisodium phosphate, and you use it in liquid form. You make a saturated solution. You add a few drops like you would Darvan, and it disperses a lot of things when Darvan won't.
But try to thin it out. If those two, oh, and then the other thing is when you do add in a dispersant, the other thing you want to do before you go and treat the whole batch is make sure to let that test batch age. Give it 3 days, because it may turn back to yogurt. And so
Yeah.
you really need
And
to make
mix
sure
it
that
really
this
well.
is really well.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I think there are some solutions. I hope Steve had previously tested this glaze. And it's a thing of why this, he doesn't say why this glaze is out in the world or where he got it from or anything like that. But do know, everybody, 13% tin. And we didn't even mention, like, tin is crazy expensive, y'all. Like crazy expensive, which is why he's in such a bind, because he spent a lot of money on
Maybe he has a tin mine that he's just it's in his
It's just laying
backyard and
about.
it's just laying about. He just decided to use it, see what it would do.
Steve represents big tin. That's what it is.
Yeah, right. He's pushing tin on us. Well, Steve, you need to follow up with us on this question.
Yes, I want to see what the fired product looks like. I want to see what
Absolutely.
13% tin will look like.
Yeah. Did you test? And then when you tried to fix it, did it work? We're dying here. So please, Steve, let us know how it goes. All right.
Yeah.
So let us move on. And our next question also comes from the UK. This is James from Bath, England. And James has perhaps a technical, but perhaps a philosophical question about robustness of pots.
Hey, for Flux Sake, this is Sean from Franklin, Tennessee, and I've got a question.
One job, Ben.
It's his new name. Ben.
One job, Ben.
One job, Carter.
Hey, for Flux Sake, this is Sean
Go,
from Franklin,
Sean.
Tennessee.
You want to do that one instead?
Yeah, should we do that one first?
No. I can do this. I'm a professional.
Sure. Let's go with that.
Hello, I'm James Cole from Bath, England. I laughed out loud several times during your episode with Nick, so thank you for that one.
Nice.
In that episode, you discussed the merits of Cone 6 and Cone 10. I have a question that's been niggling at me for a while about that. Now, I don't want, vitrification to hog your answer, or the relative costs of materials, or anything that's a behind-the-scenes concern, because what I'm really interested in is the difference in robustness of pots fired at Cone 6 and at Cone 10. We all know that low-fired earthenware is more fragile than mid and high-fire stoneware, but it's a growing perception in me that the work I'm firing at Cone 6 is more likely to chip than the work I fire at Cone 10. And in some of the Cone 6 damage, I think I'm discerning the glaze coming away from the clay, as if it's not as bonded as it might be. And, it's very important to me that the pots I make last a long time. I put effort and energy into making them, and people give me money for them, and I want them to last. So am I right in feeling that there's a meaningful difference in robustness, or is it all in my head? Thanks. Love your podcast. Bye.
Thanks, James. Well, I have to say, before you give, technical answer, I'm kind of my own little ceramic test center, my dishwasher and I.
You're a Cone 6 potter.
Yeah, well, but the coffee mugs that we use on a daily basis, my wife and I, they're in a cabinet, and it is a mixture of high, mid-range, and low. And I kid you not, because we are lazy as hell, those go through the dishwasher at least twice a week, right? And I see what gets chipped first. And honestly, I don't see any difference between the 6 and the 10. And dishwashing handmade mugs is terrible. I mean, I would never do that with, stuff I really care about.
Oh, we put 100% of our, well, no, I can't say it. We put 99% of our mugs through the dishwasher.
Really? I'm not alone.
I only have one mug I don't put in the dishwasher, and it's only because it's an acid etched crystalline glaze from my buddy Ian. And the way that the acid etching works, you lose the effect when you put it through the dishwasher. So I just hand wash it, but it's not for durability's sake. It's just I like the effect of it on dishwasher. So you're not wrong in that.
Thanks.
Okay, next question.
Well, no, didn't answer James's question. I don't know. Oh, I want to go back and just say to Kathy, you're making pots at Cone 6. You've been around. You've worked at various temperatures. What's your position on his position?
I mean, it's the. I know, right?
I am trying to get honest and heartfelt input here, and producer Ben is trying to turn this Harry Springer. Oh my goodness! And for you young people, that's an old person reference.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I'm old school, so even though when I went to 6 in grad school, and that came from my beloved professor Linda Arbuckle, was like, why are you firing to 10 in the electric kiln? Why don't you just do 6? And so I was like, oh, that's a crazy idea. So I tried that. And I'm not making work for, daily use. I'm not a production potter, etc. But I've been taught to make the work in a way that should be able to stand up to it. So I don't think my work particularly is a good example, except maybe mugs. But again, like in all the work that I've made and I've used, I don't see a huge difference other than the clay itself, like the stonewares, just have like a different weight to them. And the stonewares tend to be, I just tend to see it more in cone 10 than 6.
I mean, I think if cone 6 and cone 10 are well made, there's probably not much of a difference.
It's a big
No.
if.
Yeah, I mean, if that's
But
the
you never
question,
did
because
cone
there's
6, Rose. You were
I mean,
always
I
10.
did, and it was so bad.
I mean, what are we talking about? The temperature difference isn't that much. I mean,
No, it's not, but it's a lot of and I'm probably gonna get chastised for this, but a lot of the cone 6 stuff is laziness where they take, oh, cone 10 and I could just fire it lower and
yes, that's not
it'll be
cool. Yeah,
perfectly fine. No, it's not
right.
gonna be perfectly fine because you have your absorption. It's gonna chip more, it's gonna break more. You're doing something to make it easier for you, but you're making it harder for your end user. So I don't know. I mean, if it's well made, I don't see a difference between cone 6 and cone 10, but Matt definitely has an opinion, I'm sure.
Can smell it coming.
23 years together, and she just finally came to the conclusion. Matt's going to have an opinion.
Yep. It's a learning kind of day.
Well, to Kathy's making a point about her own work. That is true. When I was working and coming up as a student, as a studio artist, I started off making pots, and then I started doing sgraffito because I wanted to be Kathy. And so I started doing sgraffito on pots. And at the time, I was doing all cone 10, and I kept losing all of these pots that I was making. And I'd be like, well, why the hell am I spending all this time doing sgraffito if they keep cracking in the kiln or they warp or they do this crap? And so that's when, similarly, another teacher said, well, why do you care if it's not really all that functional at the end of the day and it's more about the drawing and whatever? And they just pushed me straight to cone 04. And that's how I became a cone 04 potter, because it was more about the idea than the pot. And so that is definitely a relevant consideration because there's a lot of stress going to cone 10. Now, you said something that I will pick on, though, which is you said, well, what's the difference between cone 10 and cone 6? They're really close in temperature, but we have to clarify one huge thing about firings that most people miss, is that firings are a long process. That is true. But the thing you have to understand is that all that time in the kiln is really just building up to the point where the chemical reactions happen. And the actual chemical reactions in our glazes and our clay bodies only happen during the last 100 degrees C, 180 degrees F of the firing. That's where everything is happening. And if you already know this as a chemical reaction thing, I was thinking about this last night. When you boil water, you don't expect the water to just boil right away. No, you have to wait until the water gets to the temperature it boils because reactions happen at a temperature. Our glazes are the same way.
If I watch that pot,
and it's even worse. And you spend all this time.
That will affect the results, certainly.
Absolutely. But this is why it's such a big deal. Because if cone 6, sorry, everybody, this one I can't do the F for. They can go F yourselves. Cone 6 is 1222 C, and cone 10 is 1285 C. That's a 65 or 63 degree different C. Well, when everything is only happening during the last 100 degrees, that is a 63% difference in temperature. That's a huge deal when we are talking about the chemical processes that are going on in the kiln. So it's not a minor difference. It's a major difference as far as the chemistry that's taking place between them. Then the other part is to James's question. damn it, James. You said I'm not allowed to talk about vitrification.
Oh, here we go.
Yep.
But we have to talk about vitrification because it's the reality. You want the crazier one? Some I think it was Rose said that cone 10 feels heavier.
No, Kathy
Right?
did.
I did.
Or,
Yeah.
okay, sorry.
Mhm.
Kathy said that.
Stonewares.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stoner, no, but it's not just that. Y'all want to know something crazy? So we've worked on this huge project where we've been profiling clay bodies, and we've been looking at what do they look like fired at different temperatures. Y'all want to know something crazy that we found looking at this data? The weight of a clay fired to bisque, we'll say cone 04, and the weight of a clay sample fired to cone 10 are the same weight.
Really?
Those two samples we make all of our clay samples in a mold, so they're all starting as the same size. And then we fire them to different temperatures, and we weigh them after the firing. And the cone 04 samples weigh exactly the same as the cone 10 samples. Why? Because the clay has densified. It has vitrified. So it became smaller. That's shrinkage. That's the second form of shrinkage. We have two major forms of shrinkage. Shrinkage where the water disappears, all the particles get closer together. And then shrinkage of vitrification, which is when they convert into other things. But they weigh the same thing. But what's the difference? They've gotten more dense. So the same weight takes up a smaller area. And that is the vitrification. So does the cone 10 become more robust? Yes, it absolutely does, because you have densified it completely, which is
that a
literally
word?
making it. It absolutely is.
Is it? Okay. Densified. All right.
And so it is literally a tougher thing. Now, does that translate to rim chipping? Rim chipping is this whole other thing about geometry of rims and glaze stress and applied stress. And we could talk about rim chipping for hours, because anything
Please
can rim
no.
chip. Cone.
No.
Oh.
Yeah.
But yes, is there a difference? Absolutely. And robustness is to James's original question. That's up for interpretation. But this is why I say, and here, Rose thought she was going to get comments. Here's the one that's really going to get the comments, which is that to be clear, cone 10 is the only relevant temperature in all of ceramics. And every other thing is just a bastardization of cone 10.
Oh my God.
And that is a fact. And I will come at y'all with charts. I'm going to walk around Ansica, and I'm going to have these facts printed on playing cards, and I'm going to throw it like Ricky J. Just like, boom, fact to your neck.
We're going to
Boom.
throw things at you.
Yeah, paper cuts left and right. But, this is not the place to go into all of the details. But it is absolutely a fact that cone 10 is where these things happen. And to go to any other temperature is sacrificing something, whether it's
But I don't.
densification or
But
strength.
can I get back to your everything's happening in the last 100,
Uh-huh.
right? So if you're using a cone 6 body that's formulated to do its thing at cone 6 in the last 100, isn't that as strong as a cone 10 body going to cone 10 and doing its thing in the last 100? Really?
Nope.
Oh,
Because
I quit. Everybody, thank you so much.
Oh, nice job, Matt. You made
I
Kathy
will
quit.
I will take your premise that the body is fully vitrified at cone 6. Now, we've talked on this show plenty that is not necessarily true with a lot of clay bodies, but we'll just say you have a vitrified clay body. No, because clay body temperature, why cone 10 is cone 10, is for two specific reasons. One has to do with making the simplest, most durable glazes. That chemical reaction is done at cone 10, but also a complete vitrification process, which is the full formation of mullite and glass, which are the things that form in our clay body. That transition is complete at cone 10. And so if you're only firing to cone 6, your mullite formation is low, and that makes your body more prone to certain problems, to less densification, to less inherent strength, and more prone to things like warping and a whole bunch of other problems that we could get to in different situations. But again, it is why, no matter how much the cone 6 propaganda, and believe me, I've seen it for decades of people trying to make themselves feel better about firing at cone 6, it simply is not true. Now, I'm not trying to guilt people for firing to cone 6. We've talked about this a lot. I know everybody's doing the best that they can with what they have. I know that kilns are definitely being designed and sold as cone 6 kilns to be as cost effective as possible. I know that kilns are an expensive thing to buy, but the reality of the situation is y'all are drinking the copium. And that is just the way it is. The reality of the situation is James is 100% correct. Cone 10 is cone 10 for a reason, and things are inherently better at cone 10. I'm not saying cone 10 is perfect. I'm not saying that everything is going to be hunky-dory at cone 10. Like I said, I gave up on cone 10 as an artistic medium because of failure. I get it. I have been there. But the facts are still the facts. Now y'all
Okay,
come.
well, producer Ben, we apparently have mullite inferiority complexes. And I don't think we have enough time in this episode to actually get
We'll give Ben
into
a
this
therapy
conversation
episode later.
So
And try
yeah,
Ben's book on low
let's
temperature
let
days, 'cause we love it.
everybody just absorb all of that information in. Please send your comments directly to Matt and leave Rose, Ben, and I out of this. But seriously, we have run out of time, so we will continue this another time. But until then, Matt and Rose, bye.
See you,
Bye,
Kathy.
Kathy.
Well, folks, that's it for this week's episode of For Flux Sake. I'd like to thank the listeners who submitted questions this week, and if you want your question answered on the show, shoot us an email at ForFluxSakePodcast@gmail.com. So join us next time, and when in your studio, remember what Rose always says.
Always remember to test, test, test. This is a test of the emergency glaze system. Beep.